No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Hey everyone, this is Chris.
And Lorenzo.
And welcome to our Best of Saturday series. Now that we have hundreds of episodes, we get a lot of listeners asking us where to start.
So we'll be selecting some of our most popular episodes to share each Saturday from our years of podcasting. We hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, this is our 200th episode.
Yeah, 200, baby.
200. I know we have way more than that if you count Thoughtful Thursdays and Talent Tuesdays and Pay It Forward Fridays and our interviews and stuff like that. But our core Monday morning episodes, we're at number 200 today, and that feels like a pretty big milestone to me.
Yeah, it's exciting. Like you mentioned it the other day, and because to your point, we've done so many. I think we're somewhere in the range of 370 total, pieces of content we've put out. But that's exciting, man. It's been a good 4, 5, 6 months here of just milestones for the podcast.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we're about 3 weeks away from finishing our 3rd full year of doing this and entering our 4th year. And it has just flown by. It doesn't feel like it has been a full 3 years of doing this.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's, we always talk about it and people ask us about podcasting. And I know you and myself were part of a bunch of different podcast groups on Reddit and Facebook and different places. And when people ask us about, what is it and how you've seen the success that you've seen and the downloads that you've had, I think we always talk about the fact that it's a passion project and something that we believe in and we enjoy doing. And when it's something like that, you don't ever really run out of content and you don't really run out of energy when you're talking about things that matter to you, when you have a show, a podcast, a YouTube channel dedicated to something that you really believe in.
And it shows too, it's validating. I mean, as well as I do, we just had an interview with a very major business publication that'll remain nameless for right now on top 10 leadership podcasts for leadership in a time of crisis. And we were specifically reached out to as having content that really resonates with people around the changing landscape of the workforce in the era of COVID-19. And I thought that was, I loved that because it wasn't just another, top 10 list. I mean, everybody puts out their top 10 lists, but the fact that it was specifically for the work that I know you and I have really put a lot of time and effort into trying to make sure we're cognizant of the fact that leadership now, it's always been evolving, but it's very different now than it was even 6 months ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciated that to your point as well, that it was like, them wanting to also ask us, like, what episodes would we like to make sure they're shared for people that are going through some of these changes and challenges right now in regards to leading people in this situation. So I think that it'll be super exciting to see that come to fruition and have it published. And of course, we will share it on all channels, and I'm sure we'll talk about it on the podcast. But it's very exciting. But it's because of all of our loyal listeners and those of you that take the time to review the podcast and write in and do all the things that allow us to have the kind of the popularity that we have in some of the rankings and some of the social media pages. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm also actually looking forward to seeing who the other 9 podcast shows are in this article when it comes out, because I consider myself a lover and a listener of podcasts just as much, if not more, than a producer of podcasts. And I'm always trying to, make my leadership skills better. I know you are too. And so I'm guessing there'll be a lot of great content from the shows that are kind of covered in this article.
Yeah, I think it might be able to make my job a little bit easier with Pay It Forward Friday as well, because then we'll have some potentially new people here that we can dig into, take a look at their content, and then help share it out.
Yeah, I love it. So one of the things I want to do today for our 200th episode is I want to take it back to the beginning. And so what I mean by that is, you and I discuss briefly the topics that we do on the show before we actually record the show. Sometimes just for a minute or two, sometimes for more time than that, just to kind of see if there's a full episode there. But if I think back to the very first, maybe 50 episodes we did, some of those episodes were done when we started recording the show. One of us would bring up the topic and the other would have no idea what it was prior to the topic being brought up. And so what I want to do for our 200th show is I have a topic that I found that is going on that I had to deal with in my personal life, and I want to bring it up to you because you've never heard this before, and so I want to see what your reaction is. So we'll kind of take it back to the basics here. So I was at one of the places that I consult for recently, and I came across an employee who had clearly just been crying. And I was the first time I'd seen that employee that day. They weren't crying at the moment, but their eyes were kind of red and puffy, and they were kind of looking down as they passed. And I won't tell you what I did. I want to ask first, what would you do in a situation like that if you were in a building and one of your coworkers, somebody you had a good relationship with in general, that you either saw them crying or saw evidence that they had just been crying? Has that ever happened to you before? And what would you do?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think I think in general, just remembering when we talk about people coming to work and being their unique selves, and bringing everything with them there. People are in different parts of life, and things happen, and good things happen, bad things happen, stressful things happen, and then you layer on, a lot of what's going on, currently in the environment, and people, being stressed or being anxious about illness and stuff like that. Like, you're going to run into a lot of emotion. And so I think first and foremost, in my experience, is recognize that you see that. Hey, are you doing all right? I see something's bothering you. Are you okay? Do you need a minute? Do you need some time? Just basically just offering what you can offer. And for some people, that's an ear for them to talk to. For some people, it's just some space for them to kind of work through it. And there's been conversations where I've had somebody say, like, I can tell that you're upset about something. I don't know what it is. But you tell me what you need in the moment right now. And I will support you with whatever that looks like. So I think that's it. Not having any more context than what you described, that would probably be my approach to it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think we have a general level of discomfort when it comes to seeing a coworker or a colleague who is in an emotional state like that. I think it makes us uncomfortable. And I try to put myself, because it made me uncomfortable. And I had a good relationship with this person. There's something that we do as human beings, at least I think we all do it, I know I do it, where when I see somebody who is upset, my very, very first reaction is to internalize it myself and think, what did I do? When if I had done something, I would have known if I had done something. Like, at this point, But in the moment, there's something that viscerally happens where it's like, oh my gosh, what did I do? Or if it's not a fear of that I did something, it's a fear that whatever I do next is going to be wrong, even if that decision is to do nothing, because doing nothing can be wrong also. And so I think that becomes a very uncomfortable situation for a lot of leaders. I can tell you the situations where I've seen this happen, where I am most comfortable, are in situations where I already have a good relationship with the employee. Because doing the wrong thing in the moment is not judged harshly if you already have a good relationship with a person. Doing the wrong thing is judged harshly when it's the first interaction you've had with somebody in 2 months, and now you're trying to console them when they've just been crying. And so I try to take myself out of that and think, okay, you would know if you did something wrong. I didn't do anything wrong here. So let's approach it from the next standpoint, which is what's the right move here to help this employee in this moment. I think we're going to see a lot more of this, because I will tell you, when I found out what the issue was, the employee almost felt embarrassed telling me, because it wasn't anything. It wasn't anything specific. It was everything, is how they put it. And I feel like before the last 6 months, when I would see an employee who might have been in an emotional state, there was a specific reason for it. Either a client or a customer yelled at them, or they messed up on something, or they got bad feedback from a leader, or they got passed over for a promotion they wanted to go. There was like a trigger that actually made it happen. And in this particular instance, and I think a lot of leaders might be seeing this in their places of business more these days, the trigger isn't anything specifically on its own. It's the culmination of a lot of really stressful things happening in a lot of people's lives that are building up, and the actual thing that sends them over the edge might be so tiny that they almost feel embarrassed saying that this is what made them cry. But it's not actually that made them cry. That was just the straw, the last straw. And so I want to know, what do you think about that? Because I think I'm seeing it more.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Like I said earlier, I think that just there's a lot of kind of anxiety going around right now. There's a lot of things that are happening, and you think about how it impacts an individual, but also the fact that many of these things can impact a household or a family or other people in a family. And we've talked about on the show and continue to talk a little about things like childcare and schooling, and there's been so much that has changed so very, very quickly that I think a lot of people I'm sure, are feeling overwhelmed, and a lot of people are unsure of the longer term impacts on many things. So I think that's probably why you're seeing it a lot more often now. It's not that it didn't exist before. I just think that it was a little bit less often and a little bit more specific to maybe an individual circumstances versus this greater impact that we're feeling as a society and all the things that are going on. So I think that as leaders, being conscious of that, being aware that these things are probably going to be happening, if not already happening, in a more consistent basis. Understanding, again, that people appreciate support in different ways, and it's actually upon them on how they define how they want the support. There's many times as leaders, we have this belief that we just need to sit down with them, and we need to counsel them, and we need to find out and get to the root of it. And I have to offer advice, but like the reality is this: like I'm a leader of people. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a therapist. Like I don't do any of these things professionally. So while I want to be able to help and add value in a way that I can, I also have to be really conscious of like that's not actually my wheelhouse. And I'm very limited on what my life has been about and what my experiences are. And while I might be able to apply some of that to an individual, I think it's important that, we provide people the support they need in the moment. And then we provide them with the options they have that can be a longer term support for them in ways that we cannot be, So that's just something that I would make mention of, that it can be really easy for a lot of leaders to try to fill those roles and be that person without having any of the background or experience to do that effectively. And sometimes that means it could turn it into a worse problem.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's take it back a minute and talk about a different scenario, because I think this is one that more leaders face. And this isn't the I passed somebody in the hallway and saw that they were upset. I think a lot of leaders are going to see issues where the employee starts crying or becomes emotional in front of them. Either they're in the middle of a conversation about something, whether that be, performance counseling, development, it could be a lot of different things. Have you ever been in a situation where an employee that you were talking to actually became emotional during the conversation, and how did you react to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think there's different emotions that come out of things. Sometimes if you're having a conversation with somebody around performance and or maybe policy violations, things like that you have to do as a leader. Sometimes those emotions can come out when people consider what the outcome could be. Whether they did something wrong intentionally, they did something wrong by accident. Those things can happen. And I think when those emotions start to show, you're respectful of that time and say, hey, I see that you're getting emotional. That's okay. Do you need a minute? Can we, do you feel comfortable kind of carrying on through this dialogue and conversation? Like just having the opportunity to, again, recognize what's going on and then allow that person the chance to decide what is the best route of action for them. I think in some, conversations where it can be, I've had conversations where it had nothing to do with anything that was bad or wrong. We were just talking about their development. And as a part of that dialogue, it kind of, triggered them to a degree to think about something in their past around their development or around something that they may have gotten, feedback on or felt bad about, or who knows, that is now kind of bubbling itself up into the conversation without any, negative connotation or intent whatsoever. But again, the approach is very much the same. It's like, hey, it seems like, it seems like this is, causing you to be a little bit emotional, and that's okay. Like, that's fine. Is this something that you want to share, or, is something that you would like to take a break on this, or, can we continue, or, how do you feel about that? And again, allowing them to decide where the conversation goes and how it goes, I think is the best, advice that I could give, considering the experience that I've had. Some situations, again, if it is a situation where somebody's going to get upset because they did something wrong and they did it wrong on purpose and they got caught, you still want to have some empathy to their emotion, but like, we're probably not going to walk away from this conversation right now.
Right.
This has to end in a way that is a part of what the process is for the organization.
Yeah, I agree with that. I put myself in a situation where I have been given bad news before. And I'm not an emotional person, but I have been in situations where a leader was giving me tough, critical feedback, and they became robotic about it, almost as if the relationship we had up until that point didn't matter anymore, because they were more concerned with checking the boxes off based on what their responsibility was as a leader, and that took precedent over their perceived responsibility to me and to our relationship. And that can be a really tough line to walk for a lot of leaders, because they're worried that by departing from that company byline of this is what I'm supposed to say, this is the message that has to be landed, and it's very important that we get this message landed because I have a responsibility. I'm not doing my job if I don't land this message right. But on the flip side, by doing it exactly the way that the organization prescribes to me to do it is almost spitting in the face of whatever relationship I have with this person already. And so in one regard, it becomes easy to do that if you don't have a relationship already. You go through the motions, you become robotic about it. If you never put in the time or effort in the relationship to begin with, that's going to seem par for the course. But I've been in situations where I felt like I was talking to a different person. I almost wanted to say, who are you? Like, what? This isn't a conversation we've ever had before. Why can't you just talk to me like I'm a person, or like in the context of the relationship up to this point? Why does it have to sound like you're an attorney reading this to me instead of just, my coworker and my friend? And I think it takes real leadership skill to be able to satisfy both requirements, to be able to do what the company says, this is the message you have to land, especially if it's in something that goes in an employee's permanent file or something that is leading to their termination, while also making sure that they feel like you are there, that you have their back. But that can be the difference between the employee leaving the interaction with a good feeling about what just happened. This idea that an employee has to leave a negative interaction feeling negative, I think is BS. It doesn't have to be. I have terminated employees before where there was a hug at the end, because the realization that they were in the wrong role to begin with was there. There was this kind of mutual understanding that this was what needed to happen and that they were going to be better off for it. It takes work, it takes effort, and it takes a relationship. But if it's done well, I think any leader can do that, versus just kind of writing it off like it never happened. That makes no one feel good.
No, I completely agree. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 Minute Hack.
The 1 Minute Hack.
All right, this episode's 1 Minute Hack is about remaining consistent in the context of your relationship with people when having emotional conversations. Whether you're passing somebody in the hall who is crying, or whether you're delivering bad news to somebody and they become emotional, it's important that the person that is interacting with you that is becoming emotional or is emotional sees your response as something that fits with the greater context of your relationship with them as a whole. So before you interact with somebody where you think it might become emotional, or before you interact with somebody who has already been emotional, think about how you would interact with this person normally. Think about what you would say to them when they were not in a state of emotion, and make sure that your interaction with them, the first thing you say, the last thing you say, meeting them where they are and allowing them to feel the way that they are feeling without making them feel like you're glossing over it or not even acknowledging it, or worse, telling them, giving the impression that they're wrong for feeling it that way. Make sure you don't do any of those things. And the way you do that is to really think about how you would interact with this person on a daily basis if you do, or on a weekly basis if you have performance counseling sessions or development sessions with them, and go through the motions in your head about what those look like. Make sure that your interactions with them fit that. Don't let the emotion of the situation allow you to depart from what your commitment to that relationship is, because that's when you'll come off looking like a boss and less like a friend.
Yeah, I think it's a great 1 minute hack. And, as always, understanding the moment and, as a leader, taking into account where people are at and kind of what they're working through, like those things and the nuance and the observation of people, especially those that you spend a lot of time with, so you can kind of understand when they're either in or out of character and things that are going on. I think that's critical. And again, like I think it is perfectly fine, and you should absolutely vocalize that you see that something is bothering them, something is wrong, because I think it's important for people to hear and to understand that if you want them to be able to open up and have real dialogue with you. It also sometimes sometimes nothing really is wrong, and they're unaware of their behavior or their look or how or what's going on, and they go like, oh no, I was thinking about this one thing, but thanks for kind of like snapping me out of it by realizing that I'm not actually in a space that I normally am at. So I think it's a great 1 minute hack.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate one thing that I said earlier, and that's that take yourself out of it from a standpoint of the ego. Don't assume it's because of you. Sometimes all that's needed is just a hand on the shoulder to say, hey, I'm here for you. If you want to talk, I'm here for you. That's all it takes sometimes, because at the end of the day, they might feel uncomfortable or embarrassed that they're in the situation already, and a simple line and then moving on is giving this employee permission to feel the way that they are, for them to know that you were there for them as a friend and as a confidant and as just an ear to listen to. Sometimes that's all it takes to get into the moment, and then then the ball is passed to that employee and let them kind of meet you where they are.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.